And second part is about the multiple intelligence intervention which is happening in psychometric assessment. Thank you.
Great. One last situation. Okay. Okay. So we'll get to one last question. The last question.
We are trying to predict something unpredictable. Number
Okay.
one. Number two, how are the cognitive biases influencing the psychometric test?
I think we've got enough for us to finish up by 8:30 tomorrow morning. Great. So what we thought is fantastic set of questions, great pointers for the panel. The way we thought that we will kind of go about it is quite a lot of questions were about certain facts, myths about assessments, right? And I thought the panel can shed light on what are the myths, what are the questions? Can something be fundamentally measured? Is it not measurable? Stuff like that, in your experiences. We also thought, well, of course, our Prime Minister has dismantled the Planning Commission. We thought we will take a last 5 years and the next 5 years view, right? If we were in this room in 2009 and we were predicting the next 5 years of assessments, what would the world look like then? What has happened in the last 5 years in the field of assessments? Right? And what is going to possibly happen in the next 5 years? Like, what are the trends that we as practitioners should watch out for? And Bangalore is the IT capital, and I can't help but ask the question: what is the role of technology in assessments itself? Right? We've got one or two points on that. And lastly, if we are users, buyers in the sector, in that segment, what are the things we should watch out for? Right? What differentiates a good test from a bad test? So that's, I think, some of the questions that has come out has kind of covered some of these aspects. Obviously, assessments and the spectrum is almost like cricket. And going back to the analogy, right from freshers assessments to mid-level career assessments to senior leadership assessments, assessments for development, assessments for individual growth, it covers the whole spectrum. And of course, each of you have certain spheres of experience and expertise that you can then focus on. So with that, without further ado, over to you guys. Where to start?
Of the 20 questions or the years I've been
But maybe you can start off with your experiences. So instead of responding to specific questions.
Okay, so let's start there. I'll kind of give a perspective of maybe my context, and the DDI context is going to be different, as Martin just described. So hopefully you'll get a flavour across all the areas of assessment. Now I'm sure if I asked everybody here tonight, how would you define assessment, you would get 153 different definitions. So the way we look at assessment is in a holistic fashion. We are not so much of a testing provider. So DDI does deep dive assessment center, more one-on-one individual assessments, where you probably would spend a minimum of 4 to 8 hours with us. Okay? So that's the kind of context that I'm going to set up here. But having worked in South Africa, Australia, China, and India, I'm also going to try and paint a flavour that is not just specific to India. All right? So that again, we don't, because we may have, for example, a technology bias. That might be a bias that we bring to it and think that technology is going to play that role, and I'm sure it will. But let me start with the sort of this notion of myths of assessments. The first thing, and please, I do know that I'm preaching to the converted here. This is a smart room, very intelligent room of people who know a lot about assessments. So what I'm going to say is pretty obvious, I think, to most of us. But the first thing is that assessments or diagnostic tools are not the answer in themselves. So people think that diagnostics very often are the things that are going to change behavior. It's just going to see the doctor and they just diagnose you. They don't change you. It's what we do with it. And it's how we incorporate what we hear and what we understand from these tools, and how we implement them, how we communicate them, how we integrate it with everything else in our organization. So I think the first myth there is diagnostics are not the savior of everything. Okay? The second thing you hear a lot in this market in particular, and I didn't hear it fortunately tonight, but that's about 360s. So 360s are perception tools. So very often people are making decisions based on perceptions. Now, if you truly want to understand behavior, you can't take perception alone. So let's understand the purpose of the tool. Let's understand what it is that we want to use assessment for, and choose the appropriate tool, approach, or other to get to the outcome. The other thing is sometimes we forget to look holistically when we diagnose. So again, an instrument on its own. Sometimes the myth is, well, it's the instrument's problem. The instrument is inaccurate. It's not valid. That's not the case necessarily. Have you actually done your homework to make sure that you formed, whether it be a norm database, have you validated the tool, have you run it for sufficient time? Are you using the right? Are you setting it up properly? Right? So sometimes it's the myth out there is it's the problem is the tool. The other thing, right? Well, maybe I should stop there. Let me pass over to some of my esteemed colleagues here.
So wonderful to be here. I think I've played a role at EDI, come from a very heavy assessment, psychometric background, with a master's in occupational psychology and now with YSC. I think similar to DDI, so our approach is again quite holistic. We don't have a psychometric. Our psychometric is the process itself. So we are trained psychologists with deep understanding of human behavior. I guess what we're known for in the market is really differentiating performance and potential. So our work in India over the last 4 years has been really to help organizations make emotional decisions, but also to differentiate performance with potential, because they're not the same thing, and often we confuse the two. So we really see potential as those future underlying psychological characteristics. And in fact, we are developing a psychometric around that, which will be incredibly helpful. I think in terms of myths, often I think the big one really around assessment is actually we are very situational and we're changing every day. But I think the research over the last 50 years around personality research is that half of us, we are pretty stable. We do have stable traits that can be measured, but of course there's another 50% that is very much dependent on the context. And I'm sure Andrew and Val will share a lot about those contextual demands. But if you look at all of us, we could all have exactly the same psychometric profiles, but all of us are very, very different. So I think where YIC is quite different, we really tap into people's life story. We go back to where it all started. And I think the myth is when we sit down in a one-on-one assessment, people don't really want to talk about their personal life. They just want to talk about their work experience, the highs and lows, and almost kind of dismiss their life story and those values and those early influences that have an incredible impact on our levels of drive, our aspiration, our purpose, how resilient we are, and all the research around looking at patterns of behavior and looking at the story. It's kind of unique to see people's levels of resilience and adaptability over time. So I think that's where we're quite different, but I think all of us are very holistic. We do use psychometrics as a conversation starter, but they're not always valid. And we use them at the end of the process to validate that life story. And sometimes we might use a 360-degree approach, but as Andrew said, it's perception and it needs to be calibrated. So often I've met clients that are just making these emotional decisions on 360-degree data, which I think is a big myth. Conscious I'm taking up a lot of class time and you'll bore my voice. But I think what I've seen, so I was really lucky. I came to India 2009 from London into Chennai, very different market. And I think the big demand was all fascination around assessment and bringing in the rigor. Because I felt a lot of the talent professionals, they didn't have the rigor. It was very much about your connections, it was about those informal relationships, and quite unstructured. So I think I've seen the last 6 years, it really evolved to be a lot more structured, a lot more rigorous. I think everybody in the room, you have a good understanding of what you're looking for. think a real shift away from tools that are valid and they are measuring workplace performance. So I'm certainly seeing that. I think technology obviously is going to play more of a role. I guess YC, we operate more at a senior level, which I think is then less about psychometrics and really tapping into that story and longer term plan and purpose. So, we can do a lot more with technology. Our approach is quite consultant dependent, unlike the DDI approach. I think, the future as I see it, I think, I'm doing assessments over FaceTime on a mobile phone. I mean, it's just the craziest thing, and I wouldn't have done that 5 years ago. I even assessed somebody that really couldn't speak English. He could only speak Gujarati over BC. Can you imagine? But actually, it's amazing what a water bottle and sign language, and I kind of understood his story. So his line manager also agreed. So that's a little bit of our approach. Right?
Thanks, Mel. Okay, I'd like to just focus on a few of the questions that were asked. I think I'm not going to talk about what we do, but I think one thing that I found working in India is that at the moment assessment is mostly done subjectively without very much evidence. And one of the changes that is happening and going to happen more is that assessment has to be evidence-based. So whatever tool or methodology or vendor or whoever you use, it's all about having to justify your decisions with good quality data. And this is because of increased legislation around fair selection, equal opportunities, lack of discrimination in selection and so on. So as these regimens come more into India, the methodologies you're using will be required whether you like it or not. So what we're about is helping us in India, build more evidence-based performance assessment methodologies. So that's our approach, is what we're about. A couple of questions that I'd like to kind of deal with quickly if I can. Somebody said, how stable is the result from an assessment? If I'm assessed today, how do I know if it's true tomorrow? A simple answer to this is that different tools will provide a different level of stability. Some tools are quite stable and some change very situationally. So it really depends purely on the tool that you're using. And most tools will explain that. It will say this is a very stable tool or this is a situational tool. It is likely you could use it again in 6 months and you'll get a different result. So that information should be provided by the publishers of the tool, and it will help you decide whether that tool is going to suit your purpose or not. The other one that I think there was a lot of confusion around is the question of this was number 3. The lady was asking, you were asking about behavior, competencies, psychometrics, and kind of all getting mixed up and confused. There's a whole lot of terminology around here that really does tangle you up very easily. And I think we're probably the cause of that most of the times. I do appreciate that, and I think there are some things that can be sorted out. This links to the other question the gentleman asked. If psychometrics is based on the past, how does it predict the future? So this, to me, was a very clear indication of where there's a lot of confusion about what we're trying to do. To me, there's 3 very clear areas that we need to look at to get a rounded, holistic assessment. One is, what has the person been doing recently in the past? What is the person doing now? And what are the preferences that a person has, which is going to drive what they do and the choices they make. So these 3 things are very different, and to get data on all of these 3 you need different tools. So a psychometric test can only give you an indication of a person's preferences, the 3rd one. It can also give you an indication of a person's intelligence, which will also drive their future performance. So this is a very different part of the first 2. What have they been doing in the past and what are they doing now? So in the past, I'm sure you're all familiar with competency-based interview methodologies. That's where we get data from recent past. And what the person is doing now is what we do, where we will observe, do the interviews, get a lot of observation data, field-based data on what is the person actually doing now in realistic situations. So we get the past, we get the current, and the preferences. If you get these three sets of data, you will get the highest level of predictability in your assessment process. So does that kind of hopefully clarifies a little bit about future and past and all the rest of it? None of us can predict the future. We are not using glass balls, crystal balls, anything like that. But the problem is that when you're making a decision, you are actually trying to do that. You're trying to say, look, I need someone who's going to fit in the future. In a year's time, they're going to be a good performer. You are actually trying to predict. And it's very, very hard. It can't be done. Nobody can do it. If we could, we'd all be very different people. So all we can do is use what is available to us to get a better prediction. And there are some methods which have been proven to be more valid in that prediction than others. So all you can do is look at that research that says certain things will give you a low level of prediction, certain things will give you a high level, and use the one that you feel you can afford, have time for, and is applicable to your requirement. So that kind of covers a couple of things, I think. That's one question there. Up to Madhu.
Okay. That's a fantastic set of initial comments, responses to questions. I think for me, I just wanted to go a bit deeper into two of the aspects that all of you talked about. One is, Alice, you were talking about the research in psychometric space itself, globally. In your experiences, what have been some of the key research that you've come across or participated in that has had an aha moment for you guys in the space? And how do you think that's going to define the future of how we look at measuring human behavior's potential, as you said, looking at the individual now and then predicting what he or she can do in the future? That's one part that I wanted to maybe take one round of thoughts. And then the second part that I want to get into is each of you had experience in several countries, and we were talking about what is specific in India. You're also talking about the shift that you've seen from 2009 to 2014. If you were to contextualize all of the stuff that you've seen everywhere else in the world in India, what is working and what is not, from the way assessments are being used, and what's your ideal situation? So, if we can do these two rounds, then we will go back to the audience. We have a set of folks whom we've specially invited to participate in today's conversations to bring in the user perspective. So, perhaps after this, we can draw their insights and inputs, and then we could have a much deeper Q&A on some of the specific aspects that's not. Right? Okay. So,
I think for me personally, I think discovering the 5-factor model of personality. So I think over 50 years of personality research, they have discovered that actually you can map out a core stable personality. So I think when you're looking at psychometrics, I think it's always quite important to make sure that they're covering the 5 factors. And there's various instruments on the market that cover the 5 factors because it's a solid construct that they're measuring, they're covering the whole component of personality, so you're not going to miss out on anything. I know there's some psychometrics on the market that aren't covering the full 5 factors, so that's a good question to have in your mind. So I think that's an important insight for me. But because I've assessed thousands of leaders in India, and because they're not always valid as well, because experience does matter. And sometimes it can be context, and there's other factors. So I think it's also to make sure you're not using them in isolation and you're using a semi-structured approach to get to those deeper nuances and to play it out. So I think there's a danger of just looking at it in a black and white way, and that's what I've really seen. I think what's wonderful is India really evolved to be a lot more holistic in their approach.
One of the developments a number of years ago, again, that you see a number of organizations addressing by way of assessments is building on Val's point around competencies and the combining these tools. So more and more we're seeing this, and I think the research that has been done, the Aberdeen Group and a number of other organisations have sort of validated this across a number of different vendors. So it's not about the vendors necessarily, but it's about getting independent research to validate what I think numerous consulting firms might have found. But I think it's that ability to take the various behaviours, whether it be past behaviours or predicting the future. I think there are ways, I know there are ways now of setting the scenes into the future. So truly understanding, and I don't mean predicting the future, because our futures are very uncertain. And I think, a year ago with the Congress in power versus BJP, the world is a different place already, just here locally. We only have to look to the Middle East, you can look across Africa, we were talking about Scotland earlier, whatever. The world changes minute by minute, so we don't know what the future will look like. But what we can do is we can isolate scenarios into the future. We can identify what behaviours are more likely to be required into the future, and therefore set up our assessment processes to get at or to start to get a read of a future state. Not reading the glass balls, but defining what it looks like. And as Val said again, combining these instruments where you look at people's motivations, you look at people's personalities, and you understand whether they are more or less likely to be successful into that future. And that's our role as HR professionals, is to guide the organizations in their decisions, their people decisions about the future. And I think there's a lot more research these days to demonstrate a very strong correlation between assessment data from multiple sources and the ability to address business needs going forward. So I think that's just an answer to the first part of your question, Madam. The second part, just to pick up on some of the nuances, at least the differences or the similarities that I've seen, I'll tease out a couple here. If we look at data from Australia, one of the things that we notice from a personality perspective, Australian leaders are quite risk averse. So in terms of the approach, they may look for a tried and tested solution before they act on it. They may require 10 levels of, let's say, assessment data before they might even appoint somebody. Or they'd be very rigorous in their assessment of a business before they would invest. Would you find the same in India? Perhaps not. Would you require the same level of detail, rigor? Would people be more entrepreneurial? Do people, for example, in India seek out as much as they like to tell? So do you receive instructions from your leaders, or do people invite you into a debate about what a future state might look like? So these are the things that look a little different. So when you're in an entrepreneurial environment or a promoter kind of environment, is that promoter going to, or is he used to, or she used to, inviting people in to participate in that decision making? Or is that something they, prescribe? So these are the interesting things that I see are starting to change in these different markets. And again, I don't want to be stereotypical, but some nuances.
Thanks, Andrew. Excuse me, I've got a bit of a cough. Aha moments, I think there have been many. I think a couple of particular examples I'd just like to share, which probably leads into the second question as well, which is about the difference around the world, in India and so on. Around the world, if you say, I'm from UK, I know UK, USA. For instance, competency-based interview has been there for at least 30 years. It's a standard practice. Everybody uses it. There's no question. Nobody uses an unstructured interview. They just can't, because unstructured interview has no basis of evidence behind it, and they will get sued. So, that's one huge, I don't know about an aha for me, but I think it's still an aha for India, where, there needs to be that, hello, you need to learn this, HR people, you don't even know your ABCs. So that's one. Couple of things that happened recently. I was talking to a company about, why they might want to use psychometrics for some of their decisions. In the discussion, what happened was I said, so for instance, you can use these tools to help you make decisions. This guy looked at me and said, what kind of decisions might we want to make? So that was to me a realization that in India still HR, I don't know, it's just a process. There's not this awareness that we have this huge power in our hands to change the organization. But unless we use the best and the professional and the correct method, people are not going to take us seriously. So that was one huge aha. There was another one, and it's just slipped my mind right now. Oh yeah, I was doing that. I think the other one is regarding language, which is always going to be a problem. Obviously, a lot of this is done in English still in India, and I was training a group of people on a certification program recently, and we were talking about the need for objective assessment as opposed to subjective assessment. And it took me maybe half an hour to actually explain what the word objective meant as an opposite to subjective, as opposed to an objective in reaching a goal. So that although English was the medium and it was fluent and so on, this terminology and a deeper understanding of the language is a barrier, huge barrier to for me the need for objective assessment is so obvious. But if you don't understand objectivity as opposed to subjectivity, and the reason why, then it's just not going to happen. So there's a huge gap. Again, HR professionals need to learn this terminology. You should know it. If you don't know it, how on earth can you be respected by other managers in the business?
Thank you. I think one of the clear takeaways really from this conversation, which is what we used to tell clients all the time, that assessments is only a pathway for you to get your decision. It is not a decisioning tool for you, right? In fact, ages ago, I had a company which called and said, I want you to run a psychometric assessments on 150 engineers that I had, and I want you to tell me which 20 to fire. I said, those are first assessments in psychometric. I said, great, let's come and talk. And I said, go to his office, he gives me a list of 20 people. I said, these are the list of 20 that I need to let go. You do a test and tell me that I'm right. I said, that's, I said, thank you very much. We don't want to be, first of all, we didn't know much about assessments ourselves, right, in those days. Rajiv, like I say, probably true today as well. But that's the aspect which is sometimes came. Right? Going back to Val's point about the subjective versus objective, about using assessments as a crutch to make a decision and putting the onus back on the tool, saying, hey, the tool said it and therefore I'm doing it. It is one of the things that we've seen in the market ourselves. So with that, let's get back to the audience, right? And we have a few folks that we've invited to share their experiences. So we have Sanjeev from IBM, Nikhil from Madhura Courts. Sudhish, of course, has been an extensive user of assessments right through his career, and Rajiv from Metatrack, and Rajiv and team has been building a whole lot of assessments for the mass recruitment market as well. So I'd love to get your thoughts on on the stuff that we've been discussing here and challenges that you faced in your own experiences. So, Nikhil.
Yeah, good evening. I'll just give a bit of context to what where we have been doing our leadership development, working with ISC, and to answer these questions. I request Sunita to come to this level. Yeah. Madhura Courts is the Indian business of Courts PLC. It's a typical multinational company, rather old, more than 200 plus years, and across 73 countries. So even that, and the fact that we've begun leadership development in right earnest, if I may say so, I got permission of my functional boss to say this, only in the last couple of years. The way we've gone about it is, of course, segment-wise. We have, for example, the company, 73 countries. We make sewing threads, and that's one division, industrial sewing threads, and the other is crafts. So 2 divisions. So the divisional leadership and the management board, which is the CXO level, how do we build a talent pipeline for them? So that is the first level at which we looked at that segment of people. The entire leadership program has been designed and run